Welcome back, Year 4 artists. We are moving through this unit now, aren't we? Let's have a look and see what we're doing today. Can you remember what element I said we were looking at today? So there's our surprise drawing by Henry Russo again. So today we are looking at the key element of value, and that's to do with the light and darkness. And we'll find out a little bit more about that in a minute. We're going to continue experimenting with the pressure we use on our pencil. We're going to use layers to alter the value of your shading. And we're going to find out a bit more about Russo. Hopefully his artistic journey gets a bit more promising, because at the moment nobody's thinking very much of his artwork, are they? So I hope people have responded to your artwork nicer than the people responded to Russo. Today you're going to need a pencil, a piece of plain paper, a ruler and a rubber. So press pause, go and get what you need, and then let's get started. We're going to flip around the lesson a little bit today. I'm going to talk about the element first today because it's really important in our warm-up activity. So value is all to do with the lightness and darkness of colour. And the reason that we alter the lightness and darkness of colour is to make sure that we get the illusion of light in our pictures. So we can remove all the colour from a picture and we can still see shapes and lines because of the lightness and darkness of those colours. And we can also use value to show highlights and shadows in our work. So you can see here I've got something called a value scale. And if you add white to something, so the whiter something is, the lower its value. The darker something is, the higher its value. So you can see here, the more, so we started off with white and we add a little bit of black and a little bit of black, and we go through all the shades of grey and we finally get to a pure black, which would have no white in it at all. So this colour here has got the highest value, this colour has the lowest value. And this is what we're going to create now. We're going to create a value scale, and then we're going to see how varying the value, varying the lightness and darkness helps us to create an image. So you need your ruler and you need your pencil, and we're going to be thinking now about light and dark and layering our shading. Grab your pencil, grab your ruler, and let's get started. Okay, first things first, we're going to draw a line 10 centimetres long on our page. Okay. And then we're going to turn that into a rectangle that is 2 centimetres high. Put that in, filling it up. And there we have our 10 by 2 centimetre rectangle. Now using our ruler, I want you to make a little mark every 2 centimetres so we can split up our rectangle into 5 sections. We're not going to do 9 sections because that's a little bit too tricky. We'll start with 5 as it's our first go at doing a value scale. So there we have our rectangle already. Can you remember what goes in the first box? So the first box is for our lightest shade. So we're going to leave this one completely white. We're not going to touch this box at all. Then we're going to start with our lightest touch shading we can manage. So that's where our practicing our pressure of our pencil. So you can see I've moved my hand. I've not got my hand right up at the point. I've moved my hand back a little bit. So there's a lot less pressure on my pencil. And I'm going to colour in very light strokes. I'm going to use a combination of circles and diagonal lines here. I'm kind of filling in the main bit with a diagonal. I don't want to be able to see the line, so I'm then going to go very carefully around the edges. I make my shade, and I'm going to shade this all the way I'm kind of doing diagonals, but they're kind of circular diagonals. You can see as my pencil's moving all the way around until we get to the end. So you'll do that really carefully so you filled in all of those squares apart from your very first one. Then you're going to go back. You're not going to touch the second square this time, and you're going to go onto your third square, and you're going to do another layer of shading over the top of your third and your fourth and your fifth square. And then you can see what happens gradually. So we've started, this one had no shading. This one's got 1 layer. This one's got 2 layers. This one's got 3 layers and this one's got 4 layers, and I put some serious pressure in when I did this one. Might even give it another go now. You're not going to manage to get perfect black, which is why we haven't gone all the way to 9, because we would need a pure black pencil to do that. These normal handwriting pencils only really create grey shades. It's very difficult to get a true black. So you can see here, we've gone from our lowest value shade, which is white, all the way up to our darkest. And we can do the same kind of value scale with coloured pencils. So we could take, for instance, a green pencil if we were thinking about the jungle scene. And we would again do exactly the same. We would do a very light layer and we would gradually get darker and darker. And with a pencil, we can't add black, but we can push harder and we can do more layers to create the value. When you're using paint, you can actually add white and black to your paint. And you can see if we go back and have a look at what we were first looking at when we were looking at our elements. Show you back here. So you can see we've gone from light. So if we started with maybe an ordinary green here, we could add white to it to get our value scale down, and we could add little tiny amounts of black each time to get our green closer to the darkest green we could. So it's all about light and dark today. So we need to have a go, see if you can create that wonderful value scale using just your pencil and that light touch and layering. Off you go. Okay, how did you do? Have you managed it? Have you got that light touch and that layering really working? So you've got a beautiful value scale which shows a real variation in lightness and darkness. And you can see down here, if you've got 9, how little shading would need to go on in these ones, and then you get further and further up. So hopefully you've managed that. You are more than welcome to try it with a coloured pencil as well if you want to, and try and alter the lightness and darkness of a green or a red or whichever colour that you've got, and use that layering approach again to make it darker and lighter. If you want to do it with paint, remember you need to add white or add black. Okay, it's amazing what you can do with a pencil, isn't it? We're now going to think about that, using that value in the painting. So if we have a look at this painting here, this is one of Rousseau's paintings, I can see if you kind of squint your eyes, so you're really only just looking at it, you could barely see the colour, and what you start to see is the values. You start to see the lightness and darkness. So I'm going to squint my eyes, and you squint your eyes and really look at that, and you gradually, the more you close your eyes, the more the colour disappears, and the less you can see of the colour, and the more you can see the greyness of the picture. And I'm then going to pick a section of the picture which I think has real contrast. So it has parts that are really dark next to parts that are really light. And if I'm looking at this picture, I'm going to look at this section here maybe, because I've got some real light bits here, haven't I, with the white flowers, and there's a bit of white around his face there. So I'm going to pick that section of the picture. You can see now I've blown it up and I've got that, just that section, and I've got the contrast here. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to reproduce a really tiny section of the painting in grayscale, in those various tints and shades using your pencil and layering. So I'm going to give you a demonstration of that now so you can see what I'm going to do. Okay, so the first thing I have done is I've looked at a small section of the painting. I'm only using a quarter-size piece of paper. I folded it into 4. And I've drawn a very faint outline of contour lines for the key focal point, which is the monkey, the foreground here, which I've got this plant in, and some background lines. And then I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to layer. So I have to look really closely at different parts, and I'm going to size. So this part of his face here, of this monkey, is really dark. So I'm going to shade that in a number of layers. And it's better, rather than just using pressure, to also add layers, because then you can stop at the point where you're really happy with the shade. Down here. These flowers down here are going to stay really light because they're white. So I'm not going to alter the colour of those really at all. This here is a branch, and that's actually quite dark. So I am going to shade that bit in. It's not as dark as his face, so maybe I might only go over that twice. And when I look at it, I might find actually that's almost because I might have to do another layer on here, and you're going to keep on adding layers. These leaves down here are red, so they're going to need some layering. And I might go over the top again. And you're going to keep going until you have got a picture that looks basically like a black and white version of the painting. So let me show you what it's going to end up looking like. Have a look. So I've taken the painting and I've turned it into a black and white version. And can you see, this is the section I was doing, and you can see that was the face of the monkey that I made almost black. And you see how the painting, we can still see all the shapes, we can still see all the lines, just by using different values. So just shading some of it black, leaving some of it white, and making some of it shades of grey in between. You can see these are the leaves that I was doing down the bottom here. So let's have a look at the painting you're going to do. Here's the painting. We're going back to our surprise or our tiger in the storm painting. And I want you to pick a small section that you want to do. So I'm going to leave this on the screen while you do your work. You need to look really closely at it, and you need to pick a section that has some really good contrast. So in the same little square, it has really light bits and really dark bits. And I want you to screw up your eyes, and I want you to keep looking at the page and see, right, where are those dark bits? And I'm going to pick them out, and you're going to draw contour lines. And then you're going to shade in with lots of different layers until you've created a section. Press pause and off you go. Okay, how did you do? I have turned this painting into a black and white version for you, into like a grayscale version for you to have a look at. Look. So maybe you chose this section over here because there was a really dark bark of the tree here. Or maybe you chose this section with the tiger so that you could do the really dark value lines and the really light sections of him. But you can see here, how does yours compare? How does your piece of work compare to the grayscale version of Rousseau's painting? I hope you did well, but you can see just by using layers. So we've just got more and more layers to add to the shade, and all of a sudden you get that really impressive effect, don't you? Well done. I think you probably did well. Okay, let's find out a bit more about Rousseau, shall we? So yesterday, people were still very unimpressed with his paintings, weren't they? Today, hopefully things are looking up for Rousseau. He showed amazing perseverance, hasn't he? By now, this is a picture of him. Can you see this here? By now, Henry is used to the nasty critics. He knows his shapes are simpler and flatter than everyone else's, but he thinks that makes them lovely. He spends all he earns on art supplies and pays for his bread and coal with landscapes and portraits. In the afternoon, he takes off his frayed smock and gives music lessons a go. His home is a shabby little studio where one pot of stew must last the whole week, but every morning he wakes up and smiles at his pictures. Henry turns 61 years old. So he's now 61, so kind of 20 years later than when he started. Because of his poverty, so he's not got very much money, he'll never travel to a real jungle. It doesn't matter. He sees one before him, clear as day. So in his imagination, he can see what he thinks a jungle will look like. He says, it doesn't matter if I've never seen one. I've seen leaves, I've seen plants. I can create a beautiful painting even without seeing it. For weeks, he feels he's in his jungle, tenderly shaping every fern, every frond, every blade and leaf. As always, when Henry finishes the painting, he takes it to the experts to have a look at. And here you can see, this is an example of one of his paintings. It's a bit vicious there, isn't it? Many experts mock him. Oh no, still no good. One says only cavemen would be impressed by his art. But this time, several artists disagree. So there are some people that go and have a look at his paintings and go, no, I think you're wrong. The artists are much younger than Rousseau and are already well known. They befriend him. So Rousseau's got some friends now, some younger friends who are actually already artists. And whenever Henry has money to spare and stages a concert in his little studio, all the artists come. So you can see here, he's in his art studio, he's put up his paintings, he's having a little concert, look, there's some people playing music, and he's invited these people along. Along with the grocer, locksmith and other folks from the neighbourhood, they listen to Henry's students and friends play their musical instruments. Henry gives the shiniest, reddest apples to the children. One night, a well-known artist named Picasso throws a banquet for Henry. So he's made friends with the artist Pablo Picasso, and they've thrown him a special meal. The old man sits upon a makeshift throne. So you can see here, he's been put in the centre of the room. Poets recite poems for him, guests sing songs and make speeches. Henry plays his little violin and people dance to the music. His heart floats like a hot air balloon above the fields. Towards the end of his life, Henry makes a remarkable painting called The Dream, his biggest ever. As he does every year, he displays it at the exhibition and anxiously awaits the reviews. A famous poet writes, "I don't think anyone will laugh this year." So you remember in the first early days when he was exploring his paintings and exhibiting them, people were laughing at him, weren't they? A famous poet writes, "I don't think anyone will laugh this year, thank goodness." Few people do. 100 years later, the flowers still blossom, the monkeys still frolic, and the snakes keep slithering through Henry's hot jungles. His paintings now hang in museums all over the world. And do you think experts call them foolish, clumsy, or monstrous? Mais non, that's French for but no. They call them works of art, by an old man, by a one-time toll collector, by one of the most gifted self-taught artists in history, Henry Rousseau. Here he is on his tiger. The illustrator of this book's drawn a picture of Rousseau sat on a tiger with some paint flying out from behind him. So Henry Rousseau spent his whole life, most of his life, thinking he wasn't actually that good. He was convinced he was, but other people kept telling him, actually, you're not very good at this. And then he made some friends with some people who actually knew what they were talking about, who were rather famous artists themselves. And they said, no, you're doing really well. So he kept going. And even though his paintings didn't make a huge amount of money when he was alive, nowadays they're extremely popular. So a real change of fortune for Henry Rousseau at the end of his life. What are we up to tomorrow? Last lesson tomorrow. Now, I want you to think about this quote from Henry Rousseau. He says, "I always see a painting before executing it." So between now and tomorrow, I want you to see what your piece of artwork is going to look like in your head. So you're going to need to do some thinking. You're going to need to do some looking like Henry Rousseau. So I want you to draw a jungle scene. You can decide if there's going to be animals in your jungle scene or not. This is going to be whatever comes into your head when you think of a jungle or a rainforest scene. So you can think about what you've learned in English, you can think about what you've learned in geography, you can think about some of the paintings that Henry Rousseau that we've looked at, and you are going to create the image that is inside your head. So you're going to need to do some thinking. You might want to go out in the garden and look at the shapes of some leaves. You might want to go for a walk and look at the shapes of trees. And then you're going to recreate a picture like Henry Rousseau did, using your imagination and information that you've collected from looking at things. And we're going to be combining all those elements together tomorrow to create a final jungle rainforest picture. I will look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Get those ideas in your head. I want you to come with this image inside your head that you're going to put down on paper tomorrow. I will see you tomorrow.